Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to tell you why I don't support 12-step programs. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, check out some of my free resources below. So why don't I support 12-step programs like Overeaters Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous? Plenty of reasons, and I'm going to tell you why. I think the first reason is I don't like the moralistic tone to it. They make you feel like you have a moral defect, and they make you take moral inventory. Here's the truth. You don't have a character defect. You don't have a moral problem. You don't have a sin problem. What you have is a values problem. You have a decision-making problem. You have a calculation problem. You don't have a moral problem. This isn't a moral issue here. I think most people who go to AA, who go to OA, recognize that they have a problem and it's something that needs to be fixed. I think what happens is a lot of people don't think it needs to be fixed now. That's the difference. Most addicts, doesn't matter what it is, whether it's drugs, food, sex, etc., they recognize they have a problem and at some point it's worth correcting. But not everybody believes it needs to be corrected now. And that's the difference between people who recover now and people who recover later. More on that in a future video. But you don't have a character problem. You don't even have a brain defect. Your brain is operating just fine. You just need to change some of the pathways and the way you make decisions. Another thing I don't like about it is this one day at a time approach. I hate it when I hear people say that, one day at a time, one day at a time. No, you just need to live your life. And when you're confronted with the option of binge drinking or binge eating, you need to choose life without that. And what I mean is you have one of two options. You can either experience that instant pleasure, that rush, or you cannot. Okay, both of them have trade-offs. They have pros and cons. So if you decide to binge eat or binge drink, it might elevate your mood while you consume the substance or the chemical. But then there's a huge trade-off, is that it compromises all your other goals in life. Again, I'll talk about that more later, but that's really the issue here. You don't have to live one day at a time. You don't have to walk on eggshells forever. You don't have to think I could relapse any day, or those urges could come at any moment. And this leads me to my next point. I don't like the sense of helplessness that it inculcates. You aren't helpless. You are totally capable of changing the way you make decisions and changing the decisions that you make. Nothing or nobody is making you binge drink or binge eat or consume anything. You can live your life without it, and you can start living without it today if you chose to. It probably is going to take a little bit of work. It might take some coaching. That's where I come in. It might even take some therapy if you're coming in with other mental disorders and you have a lot of baggage, a lot of complex issues. Again, I can't help everybody, and I'll admit that. But you're not helpless. Nobody's helpless. I think everybody can make the changes that they want to change. A lot of times they don't have the right perspective, and there's some beliefs that are driving this behavior, but they're not helpless. The other thing I don't like is this idea that an addiction or compulsive behavior is a disease. It is not a disease. We know that. There's nothing wrong with the brain. The brain doesn't need to be fixed. You don't need surgery. You don't need an antidote. Okay, you don't need a vaccine. That's not what we're talking about here. You don't have a disease. You have what I call a calculation error. You're miscalculating the pros and cons of the decisions that you're making. So when you're in that moment and you want to drink or you want to binge eat and you want all that fat and sugar, you're putting way too much emphasis on the short-term effects that you're going to get. So if you have, let's say you have an entire cake, okay, it might feel good for a little bit, that texture, that sugar, that fat, it might numb you out, it might distract you from whatever you're thinking. But then after that, you feel terrible, it affects your self-confidence. But the moment before you decide to have the whole pie, all you can think about is the short-term gain. If you start thinking more about the long-term consequences and everything else that you're sacrificing to have that pie, you're going to start thinking differently. Not the first time, but that's where it starts. That's really what you need. You need to start changing the way you see these decisions. You need to start thinking about long-term effects more than short-term gain. And the problem with addicts is all they can all they can see is that short-term gain. It's like, ooh, look at that, look at that. And what they're not seeing is 30 minutes later, 60 minutes later, an hour later. If they did that more, I think they would think twice about it. Bottom line, you don't have a disease. Okay, don't think that for a second. If you had a disease, you wouldn't be able to recover. You would just have to wait for the disease to go away, or you would have to completely abstain from that substance. Problem is, with food, you have to eat. You can't completely avoid it. Fortunately, we know it's not a disease, and you can start changing the way you make decisions today. Another thing I don't like is this idea of having a sponsor. A lot of these sponsors are people who have gone through OA or OA previously. They don't have any formal training. I don't think they really understand the psychology. They just reiterate the tenets of the program, and if you slip up, they just say it louder, or they repeat it again and again until you get to where you want. I've heard good and bad things about sponsors. Some people really like sponsors. I don't know how much that helps, but again, these sponsors are usually not very qualified. They've been through the program, and some of them aren't even recovered themselves. I think most of them are, but in some cases, some of them aren't. You don't need a sponsor. What you need more is accountability, and you need somebody to clarify what the problem is, change the perspective, and expose the beliefs that are driving your behavior. If a sponsor can do all of that, great. But a lot of times, that's not the case. I think what you need is introspection. You need to self-examine yourself. And this might be one of the only good things about OA or AA is what are you doing? Why are you doing it? What are the beliefs? What are the habits? What is it that you really want? Why are you making these choices? How does the brain work? Why am I sabotaging myself? I think if you learn that, you would have a much better chance of recovering. You need to understand how the brain works. You need to understand reward pathways. You need to understand trade-offs. Every time you choose to binge drink or binge eat, you're making a trade-off, and you're choosing that short-term gain versus everything else. Now, the key question is, why are you doing that? And that's where I think a coach or a therapist can intervene. It's like, hey, why are you doing this? Let's explore this a little bit. I like that part. What you need more is introspection and self-examination. I think you also need somebody to show you what your choices are and to show you that you are in charge of those choices. Sometimes it feels like we're not in charge of those choices, but if you think about what you're doing and you're connected to your values, you can change the way that you make decisions. If that weren't true, nobody would ever lose weight, nobody would ever get fit, nobody would ever get out of debt. The thing is, you can start making new choices and better choices today. Another problem I have is this idea of 12 steps in the first place. Why is it 12 steps? Bill Wilson says he had this epiphany in this dream. I don't even know if this is true. I think the number 12 has to do with the number of apostles in the Gospels. There were 13 originally, and then one of them backstabbed Jesus, but that's another story. But why is it 12? Is there a certain number of steps that you need to take? I don't believe that the recovery process is as clean and linear as AA and OA make it out to be. I mean, why 12? Have we not discovered more steps since the invention of AA in the 1930s? I mean, it just seems so arbitrary to me. I don't think there's a certain number of steps. I don't think you can quantify it. Everybody's recovery is a little bit different. What everybody needs is, like I said, introspection and understanding of psychology, exposing the beliefs that are driving the behavior, and also a little bit of encouragement and accountability. But this idea that you start at step 1, then step 2, step 3, step 4, that never made sense to me. I don't like the idea of counting the days. They do this a lot in AA. I don't know about OA, but in AA, they say you count the days. I guess that provides some encouragement, but what happens if you get to day 27 and then you go back? That can be really devastating because it makes it sound like you're at square zero again. It's like in Wheel of Fortune when they spin the wheel and they hit bankrupt and they go back to zero. I don't know, that could be really discouraging to think that you've erased all that progress. Well, the thing is, when you recover or when you normalize your behavior, and when you go from binge eating or binge drinking to normal consumption, you don't have to count the days. You might have a few slip-ups here and there. In fact, you probably will, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you've erased all of your progress. When you slip up, or you relapse, or you have an episode, whatever, you need to step back, assess the situation, what went wrong, change your approach, try it again. I think that is a much more empowered way to recover. Have you ever been in OA or AA? Let me know in the comments below. Okay, I hope you found this video educational and entertaining. Don't forget to check out some of the free resources below and subscribe to my channel. If you liked this video, I think you'll like some of the other videos that you see on the screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.